Daniel Carter sat in his small office at NASA's headquarters in New York City. The room was dimly lit, the only source of light coming from the glowing screens on his desk. It was late, and most of the building had emptied out hours ago. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual energy cars honking, people chatting, and the distant hum of life moving forward. But inside, Daniel was focused on something far beyond Earth. He leaned closer to the monitor, his eyes scanning lines of data streaming. Across the screen, numbers, graphs, and charts filled the display, each one representing readings from deep space probes stationed near the edge of the solar system. For weeks, Daniel had been analyzing this information, looking for anything unusual. At first, he thought it was just background noise, random signals bouncing around the vast emptiness of space. But tonight, something felt different. "Lavra, take a look at this," Daniel said, turning to his colleague, Lavra Bennett, who was sitting at a nearby desk. She glanced up from her laptop, her dark hair falling over her shoulder as she pushed herself away from her work. "What is it?" Lavra asked, walking over to join him. Her voice carried a mix of curiosity and fatigue. They had both been working long hours lately, trying to make sense of the strange anomalies detected by the probes. Daniel pointed to a specific section of the data. "See these spikes? They're faint, but they've been consistent for the past 3 days. And they're coming from way out past the Oort cloud?" Lavra frowned, leaning in to study the readings more closely. "That's odd. There shouldn't be anything out there strong enough to register like that. Could it be interference from our equipment?" "I don't think so," Daniel replied, shaking his head. "I've double-checked everything. These aren't random fluctuations, they're repeating patterns. Almost like a signal." Lavra straightened up, her expression shifting from skepticism to intrigue. "You mean like someone or something is sending it?" Daniel hesitated, before nodding. "It's possible. Or maybe it's natural phenomena we haven't seen before. Either way, we need to figure it out." The two scientists spent the next hour poring over the data, running simulations and cross-referencing their findings with other observations. As they worked, the idea that this could be evidence of extraterrestrial activity lingered in the back of their minds. Neither of them wanted to jump to conclusions, but the possibility was hard to ignore. Across town, Sarah Mitchell was having a very different kind of night. A journalist known for her sharp investigative skills, Sarah had spent years uncovering secrets hidden behind closed doors. Her apartment was cluttered with papers, notebooks, and half-empty coffee cups, a testament to her relentless pursuit of the truth. Tonight, however, she wasn't chasing a story about political corruption or corporate greed. Instead, she was staring at her phone, reading a message that had arrived just moments earlier. The text was short and vague. Asterisk, check military satellite logs. Something big is being kept quiet. Asterisk, there was no name attached, no explanation of where the tip came from. Normally, Sarah would have dismissed it as nonsense. Anonymous messages were a dime a dozen, and most of them turned out to be dead ends. But something about this one caught her attention. She opened her laptop and began searching through public records and leaked documents related to military satellites. It didn't take long to find something suspicious, a series of classified reports mentioning unexplained signals picked up by orbiting sensors. The details were sparse, but the timing matched what Daniel and Lavra were seeing in their own data. Sarah's pulse quickened. This wasn't just some minor anomaly. It was something significant enough to warrant top-level secrecy. Whatever was happening, it was big, and someone didn't want the world to know about it. Back at NASA, Daniel and Lavra decided to take their findings to their supervisor, Dr. Alan Simmons. He was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, with graying hair and a reputation for being skeptical of anything that couldn't be proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. When they entered his office, he looked up from his paperwork with a raised eyebrow. "What? Is it now?" he asked, clearly irritated by the interruption. "If this is another wild theory about aliens, I don't have time for it." "It's not a theory," Daniel insisted, placing a folder on Simmons' desk. "We've got solid data showing an unidentified energy signature coming from beyond the Oort cloud. It's consistent, repetitive and getting stronger every day. Simmons sighed, flipping through the pages. And you think this is… what? Proof of intelligent life? We're not saying that, Lavra interjected quickly. But we can't rule it out either. Whatever it is, it's unlike anything we've ever seen before. Simmons closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. Look, I get it, you're excited, but let's not go jumping to conclusions. Space is full of weird stuff we don't understand yet. Odza, this is just some new form of cosmic radiation or gravitational wave? Keep monitoring it, but don't waste your time chasing ghosts. Daniel and Lavra exchanged frustrated glances but knew better than to argue. Simmons wasn't going to budge, at least not without more concrete evidence. As they left his office, Lavra muttered under her breath, if only he'd listen. Over the next few days, the mysterious signal continued to grow stronger. Daniel and Lavra worked tirelessly, running calculations and refining their models. Each new batch of data brought them closer to understanding what they were dealing with, but also raised more questions. The pattern was too precise to be random, almost like a code waiting to be cracked. Yet, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't decipher its meaning. Meanwhile, Sarah had taken her investigation a step further. She reached out to contacts within the scientific community, hoping to find someone who might shed light on the military's classified reports. Most of her calls went unanswered, but eventually, she managed to speak with a retired astrophysicist named Dr. Emily Grant. I've heard rumors, Emily admitted cautiously during their phone conversation. There have been whispers about strange readings coming from deep space. Some say it's alien technology, others think it's just hype. Personally, I wouldn't put much stock in it unless you see real proof. Sarah thanked her and hung up, feeling both frustrated and determined. If even experts like Emily were hesitant to speculate, then uncovering the truth was going to be harder than she thought. Still, she refused to give up. She knew there was a story here, and she was determined to tell it. Late one night, while reviewing fresh data, Daniel made a discovery that sent chills down his spine. The energy signatures weren't just growing stronger, they were multiplying. What had started as a single source was now spreading out, forming a complex web of signals. And when he zoomed in on the location, he realized something even more alarming. The sources were moving. They're heading toward us, Daniel whispered, his voice barely audible. Lavra rushed over, her eyes widening as she saw the same thing on the screen. How fast are they traveling? She asked, her tone urgent. Faster than anything we've ever recorded, Daniel replied. At this rate, they'll reach Earth. In less than a month, for a moment, neither of them spoke. The implications were staggering. If their calculations were correct, humanity was about to face something it had never encountered before. Whether it was friend or foe, they couldn't say. All they knew was that the world as they knew it was about to change forever. As dawn broke over the city, Daniel and Lavra prepared to present their findings to NASA's senior leadership. They knew convincing others wouldn't be easy, especially given Simmons' earlier dismissal, but they also knew they couldn't keep this to themselves any longer. The stakes were too high. Unbeknownst to them, Sarah was already piecing together her own version of the story. Armed with leaked documents and interviews with reluctant insiders, she was closing in on the truth. Soon, the entire world would learn that Earth wasn't as isolated as everyone had believed. What none of them could have predicted, however, was just how drastically their lives and the fate of humanity were about to change. The calm that had settled over Daniel Carter's life shattered in an instant. It started with a phone call early in the morning, waking him from a restless sleep. On the other end of the line was Dr. Alan Simmons, his usually stoic supervisor. Sounding unusually frantic, "Get to the lab immediately," Simmons said without preamble. "This isn't a drill." Daniel didn't ask questions. He threw on the first clothes he could find and rushed out the door. When he arrived at NASA headquarters, the atmosphere was electric. Scientists and technicians scurried around like ants, their faces pale and tense. Lavra Bennett was already there, her eyes glued to a large screen displaying live satellite feeds. "What's going on?" Daniel asked as he approached her. Lavra turned to him, her expression grim. You were right, she said. About everything. Before Daniel could respond, the room fell silent as a voice came over the intercom. Attention all personnel, this is not a test. Please remain at your stations. Further instructions will follow shortly. Moments later, the main screen flickered to life, showing footage captured by telescopes and satellites. What everyone saw left them speechless. Hundreds, no, thousands of massive objects had appeared near Jupiter, seemingly out of nowhere. They hung in space, their sleek, metallic forms glinting faintly in the sunlight. Each vessel was enormous, dwarfing even the largest human-made structures. They just dropped out of warp, Lavar whispered, her voice trembling. That's the only explanation. Daniel stared at the screen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. The fleet was impossibly large, its presence undeniable. Humanity's belief that Earth was alone in the universe had been shattered in an instant. Across town, Sarah Mitchell was also witnessing the events unfold. Her anonymous source had come through again, sending her classified images of the alien fleet before the government could suppress the information. She sat in her apartment, her laptop open on the kitchen table, watching as social media exploded with reactions. People were sharing blurry photos taken through telescopes, speculating wildly about what the ships might mean. Sarah knew this was the story of a lifetime. She quickly drafted an article, piecing together everything she had uncovered so far. Before hitting publish, she hesitated. Revealing too much too soon could put her in danger, or worse, get her discredited. Instead, she decided to release a teaser, hinting at the existence of classified documents without revealing specifics. Within minutes, her post went viral. News outlets picked up the story, and soon the entire world was talking about the mysterious fleet near Jupiter. Governments scrambled to respond, issuing vague statements urging calm while deploying military forces to high alert status. At NASA, Daniel and Lavra were summoned to a secure underground facility beneath Washington, D.C. alongside other top scientists and military leaders. They gathered in a dimly lit conference room dominated by a massive holographic display. General Robert Hayes, a stern man with sharp features and an authoritative voice, stood at the head of the table. We're dealing with a situation unlike anything we've faced before, Hayes began, his tone grave. Intelligence suggests these vessels are capable of traveling faster than light. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. We don't know their intentions, but we must prepare for every possibility. Daniel raised his hand cautiously. Have we tried communicating with them? Hayes nodded. Attempts are underway, but so far there's been no response. Until we hear otherwise, we assume the worst. Lavra chimed in, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. If they wanted to attack us, they could have done so already. Why wait? Why hold position near Jupiter instead of coming straight here? The general's jaw tightened. That's what we're trying to figure out. But let me be clear. If they pose a threat to Earth, we won't hesitate to act. As the meeting continued, Daniel found himself growing increasingly uneasy. The military's focus seemed to be less on understanding the aliens and more on preparing for war. Lavra shared his concerns, though neither of them voiced their doubts openly. They both knew that speaking out of turn could cost them their place at the table and their ability to influence decisions. Meanwhile, Sarah's investigation took a dangerous turn. After publishing her initial report, she received a visit from two men in dark suits claiming to be federal agents. They questioned her about her sources and warned her against releasing further information. Though polite, their demeanor made it clear that they weren't asking politely. Sarah refused to back down. She had always prided herself on her independence, and she wasn't about to let anyone silence her. Determined to dig deeper, she reached out to Daniel, hoping his expertise might help her make sense of the chaos unfolding around them. To her surprise, he agreed to meet. They arranged to talk at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. When Sarah arrived, Daniel was already seated, sipping coffee and looking anxious. She slid into the chair across from him, pulling out her laptop. I need your help, she said bluntly. What do you know about those ships? Daniel hesitated, weighing how much he should reveal. Finally, he sighed. More than I'm supposed to. Look, I can't give you specifics, but trust me when I say this is bigger than anyone realizes. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Are they hostile? I don't think so, Daniel admitted, but the military does. And that's what worries me. Over the next hour, they discussed what little they knew, piecing together fragments of information. By the time they parted ways, Sarah felt more determined than ever to expose the truth. She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was standing on the brink of something monumental and that fear and mistrust might ruin any chance of peaceful contact. Back at the underground facility, tensions continued to rise. Reconnaissance missions sent to gather intelligence on the fleet returned with troubling news. The alien ships were equipped with advanced shielding and weapon systems far beyond human capabilities. Worse still, attempts to establish communication remained unsuccessful. General Hayes grew increasingly impatient. We can't sit around waiting for them to make the first move, he snapped during one heated meeting. If they're planning an attack, we need to strike first. Daniel and Lavra exchanged horrified glances. Striking first would be catastrophic, especially given the technological gap between humans and the aliens. But arguing with Hayes felt futile. His mind was made up. That night, unable to sleep, Daniel wandered the empty halls of the facility. He found Lavra sitting alone in a small lounge, staring blankly at a cup of cold coffee. This is insane, she muttered when he joined her. They're treating this like a war, but we don't even know why they're here. I know, Daniel replied softly. But we're running out of time to change their minds. As they sat in silence, a sudden alarm blared through the facility. Red lights flashed and voices shouted urgently over the intercom. Daniel and Lavra sprinted back to the control room, where chaos reigned. On the main screen, one of the alien ships had broken formation and was now heading directly toward Earth. It's accelerating. Someone yelled. Estimated time of arrival, 12 hours. Panic spread through the room like wildfire. Orders flew back and forth as military personnel scrambled to prepare defenses. Daniel grabbed Laura's arm, pulling her aside. We need to find a way to communicate with them, he said urgently. If we don't, this could end in disaster. Lavra nodded, her resolve hardening. Together, they returned to their workstations, determined to decode the mysterious signals emanating from the fleet. Hours passed in a blur of calculations and simulations. Just as exhaustion began to take its toll, Lavra let out a triumphant cry. I think I've got something, she exclaimed. It's a pattern of mathematical sequence embedded in the signal. If we mirror it back to them, maybe they'll understand we're trying to talk. Without waiting for approval, Daniel and Lavra transmitted the mirrored sequence toward the approaching ship. For several agonizing minutes, there was no response. Then suddenly the signal changed. A new pattern emerged, more complex than before. They answered, Lavra breathed, tears welling up in her eyes. They're listening. Word of their breakthrough spread quickly, reaching General Hayes just as he was finalizing plans for a preemptive strike. Reluctantly, he ordered a temporary halt to military operations, giving Daniel and Lavra a chance to continue their efforts, though the immediate threat of war had been averted for now. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on everyone's shoulders. Humanity's first contact with an alien civilization had begun, but whether it would lead to peace or destruction remained uncertain. As dawn broke over Washington, D.C., Daniel gazed out a window, watching the sun rise over the horizon. Beside him, Lavra worked tirelessly, decoding the latest transmission. Despite the fear and uncertainty swirling around them, a glimmer of hope remained. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity wasn't alone after all, and maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The breakthrough came just as tensions were reaching a breaking point. Daniel Carter and Lavra Bennett had spent hours decoding the alien signal, their fingers flying across keyboards as they worked to establish meaningful communication. The mirrored mathematical sequence they sent out had been acknowledged by the approaching ship, and now a new pattern emerged, one far more intricate than anything they'd seen before. It's like they're testing us, Lavra said, her voice filled with awe as she analyzed the latest transmission. This isn't random noise, it's structured. They're trying to teach us something. Daniel nodded, his eyes glued to the screen. If we can figure this out, maybe we can? Actually talk to them, but we need to move fast. Every second counts. General Robert Hayes paced nearby, his expression unreadable. He didn't fully trust the scientists' efforts, but he also knew that launching an attack without understanding the aliens' intentions could spell disaster. For now, he allowed Daniel and Lavra to continue their work, though his patience was wearing thin. As the day wore on, the two scientists made steady progress. The alien signals contained patterns that seemed to correspond to basic concepts, numbers, shapes, even rudimentary ideas about space and time. It was slow going, but eventually they managed to piece together a simple message. They're asking if we understand, Lavra said excitedly. I think we can respond with a yes. Using the same mathematical language, they sent back a confirmation. Moments later, the alien ship transmitted another signal. This time, it included a series of symbols accompanied by what appeared to be coordinates. They're sharing information, Daniel realized. These coordinates, they're pointing to locations in our solar system. Maybe places they want to visit or study. Lavra frowned. Or targets, we can't assume anything yet. Hayes stepped forward, his tone sharp. What does it mean? Are they planning an attack? We don't know, Daniel admitted. But if we shut down communication now, we'll never find out? Reluctantly, Hayes agreed to hold off on military action for a little longer. Meanwhile, Sarah Mitchell was doing everything she could to keep the public informed. Her earlier articles had sparked widespread debate, with people divided over how to handle the alien presence. Some called for immediate retaliation, while others argued for diplomacy. Sarah herself leaned toward the latter, though she couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from readers, colleagues, and even government officials attempting to silence her. One evening, as she sat at her desk drafting a new article, she received a call from an unknown number. Hesitant but curious, she answered, Miss Mitchell. A deep voice said on the other end, You should stop publishing stories about this. You're making things worse. Sarah's heart raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. Who is this? She demanded. There was a pause before the caller responded. Someone who knows what's really going on. Trust me, you don't want to be responsible for starting a panic. The line went dead. Sarah stared at her phone, her hands trembling slightly. She had faced threats before, but this felt different. Still, she refused to back down. If anything, the warning only strengthened her resolve. Back at the underground facility, Daniel and Lavra worked tirelessly to decode more of the alien transmissions. As they delved deeper into the data, they began to notice something unusual, a secondary layer embedded within the main signal. At first, it seemed like static, but upon closer inspection, it revealed fragments of what appeared to be a plea. They're not just here to explore, Lavra said, her voice tinged with urgency. They're running from something. Daniel leaned in, studying the decoded text. It says, Help us, they're being pursued. The realization hit them both like a freight train. The alien fleet wasn't a conquering force, it was fleeing danger. Whatever was chasing them must have been powerful enough to drive an entire civilization across the stars. Before they could share this discovery with General Hayes, alarms blared throughout the facility. On the main screen, several smaller ships detached from the main fleet and began accelerating toward Earth. Panic erupted in the control room as military personnel scrambled to prepare defenses. They're attacking! Someone shouted, No, wait. Daniel yelled, rushing to the front of the room. Look at their trajectory. They're not targeting cities. They're heading for our satellites. Sure enough, the alien ships bypassed populated areas entirely, focusing instead on disabling key components of Earth's global communication network. Within minutes, power grids went dark, internet connections failed, and millions of people found themselves cut off from the outside world. Sarah experienced the blackout firsthand. Her laptop screen flickered and died, plunging her apartment into darkness. Frustrated, she grabbed a flashlight and headed outside, where neighbors gathered in confusion. The streets were eerily quiet, save for the hum of generators kicking in. "What's happening?" one woman asked, clutching her child tightly. "I don't know," Sarah replied, though she suspected the worst. Without reliable communication, fear would spread faster than anyone could contain it. At the facility, General Hayes ordered a counterattack, deploying drones equipped with advanced sensors to gather intelligence. Daniel and Lavra watched helplessly as the situation spiraled out of control. Their attempts to reason with the military leadership fell on deaf ears. Hayes was convinced the aliens posed an existential threat when one of the reconnaissance drones disappeared without explanation. Paranoia reached a fever pitch. Rumors spread that the aliens were preparing a full-scale invasion, and governments around the world began mobilizing troops. Desperate to prevent further bloodshed, Daniel decided to take matters into his own hands. He approached Hayes, his face set with determination. "Sir, you need to listen to me," Daniel said firmly. "We've decoded part of their message. These aliens aren't our enemies, they're refugees. Something is hunting them, and if we turn them away, we might be dooming ourselves too." Hayes glared at him, unconvinced. "Even if that's true, how do we know they won't betray us once they've gained our trust?" "Because they're already showing us they're peaceful," Daniel shot back. "They disabled our satellites instead of bombing our cities. They're trying to protect themselves, not destroy us." For a moment, Hayes hesitated. Then, with a heavy sigh, he turned to his aides. "Stand down all offensive operations for now, but if those ships make one wrong move, we strike." While the military regrouped, Sarah took drastic action. Knowing that traditional media outlets were compromised, she turned to social media to broadcast her findings. Using a portable generator, she filmed a live video from her apartment, explaining everything she had uncovered about the alien fleet and the classified documents she had obtained. "This isn't just about us," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "These beings are asking for help. If we refuse them, we're no better than whatever is chasing them. We have to come together, not just as nations, but as humans." The video went viral almost instantly, reaching millions of viewers worldwide. People took to the streets, demanding transparency from their leaders and calling for peace. Protesters held signs reading, "Welcome them," and "We are not alone." Even some politicians began speaking out, urging caution and cooperation. Inspired by Sarah's bravery, Daniel and Lavra devised a bold plan. With Hayes' reluctant approval, they prepared to board a hastily assembled spacecraft and traveled directly to the alien mothership. Their goal was simple: deliver the decoded message and offer humanity's assistance. As they suited up for the mission, Lavra turned to Daniel. "Are you sure about this? Once we leave, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," Daniel replied, his voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "If we don't try, we'll never know what could have been." With Sarah broadcasting their departure live to millions, the spacecraft launched into the night sky, leaving Earth behind. As they approached the massive alien vessel, Daniel felt a mix of fear and wonder. For the first time in human history, they were about to meet an extraterrestrial civilization face to face. The hatch of the alien ship opened, revealing a dazzling interior bathed in soft golden light. Stepping inside, Daniel and Lavra exchanged nervous glances. Whatever happened next would change the course of humanity forever, and as they walked deeper into the unknown, they couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, this encounter would lead to something greater than either side had imagined. The moment Daniel Carter and Lavra Bennett stepped onto the alien mothership, they were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. The interior was vast, with towering walls made of a material that shimmered like liquid metal. Strange symbols glowed faintly along the surfaces, pulsing in rhythm as if alive. A low hum filled the air, vibrating through their bodies and making them feel both small and insignificant. Two figures approached them, their forms tall and slender, with smooth gray skin and large almond-shaped eyes that seemed to glow faintly. They wore flowing robes that shifted colors subtly, almost blending into the environment around them. Despite their otherworldly appearance, there was a calmness about them that put Daniel and Lavra at ease. or as much ease as one could feel in such an extraordinary situation. One of the aliens extended a hand-like appendage toward them. Though it had no fingers, its movements were deliberate and graceful. Without speaking, it gestured for them to follow. Daniel and Lavra exchanged quick glances, before nodding and walking alongside their host. As they moved deeper into the ship, the glowing symbols on the walls began to change, forming patterns that matched the mathematical sequences Daniel and Lavra had decoded earlier. It was clear the aliens were communicating visually, using a language that transcended spoken words. Lavra felt her heart race as she realized they were being taught, not just spoken to, but actively included in this exchange. Eventually, they arrived at a large chamber filled with floating holographic displays. The aliens paused, turning to face Daniel and Lavra. One of them raised its arm, and a series of images appeared in the air between them. At first, the visuals were abstract, but soon they became clearer. Distant planets burning under fiery skies, massive ships tearing through space, and countless beings fleeing in terror. "They're showing us what happened to them," Lavra whispered, her voice trembling. "Something destroyed their home." Daniel nodded, his mind racing to process everything. "And now they're running from whatever caused it." The aliens continued their presentation, shifting the images to depict Earth surrounded by stars. Then came a new element, a shadowy fleet emerging from the darkness, closing in relentlessly. The message was clear. The danger wasn't just theirs, it was coming for humanity too. Lavra turned to Daniel, her eyes wide with alarm. "We have to warn them. If that fleet reaches Earth." Before she could finish, the aliens interrupted, projecting another sequence of symbols. This time, the pattern was accompanied by a sound, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate directly into their minds. It wasn't painful, but it carried an urgency that left no room for doubt. "They need our help," Daniel said, piecing together the meaning. "But not just weapons or resources. They need us to fight alongside them." Meanwhile, back on Earth, chaos reigned. With global communications still crippled, fear spread faster than anyone could control it. Rumors of an impending alien invasion ran rampant, fueled by misinformation and panic. Governments struggled to maintain order, deploying troops to major cities in an effort to reassure citizens. But the sight of armed soldiers only heightened tensions, leading to clashes between protesters and law enforcement. Sarah Mitchell worked tirelessly to counteract the hysteria, using every platform she could access to share updates from Daniel and Laura's mission. Her live broadcasts reached millions, offering glimpses of hope amid the uncertainty. She emphasized the aliens' peaceful intentions and urged people to remain calm. "We don't know everything yet," Sarah told her audience during one broadcast. "But we do know this. These beings are not our enemies. They're asking for our help, and if we turn them away, we might be inviting disaster." Her words resonated with many, sparking grassroots movements calling for unity and cooperation. People began organizing supply drives, collecting food, water, and medical supplies in case refugees needed assistance. Others volunteered to assist scientists and engineers working on ways to communicate more effectively with the alien fleet. But not everyone shared Sarah's optimism. In hidden rooms beneath government buildings, shadowy figures plotted their next moves. Among them was General Robert Hayes, who remained unconvinced that the aliens posed no threat. To him, their actions disabling satellites entering Earth's orbit were aggressive, regardless of their stated intentions. Hayes convened a secret meeting with top military leaders, presenting a grim assessment of the situation. "If we trust them and they betray us, we'll lose everything," he argued. "But if we strike first, we might stand a chance." His proposal was met with mixed reactions. Some agreed, believing humanity couldn't afford to take risks. Others hesitated, pointing out the potential consequences of attacking a technologically superior species. Ultimately, Hayes managed to sway enough votes to authorize a limited preemptive strike. Under cover of darkness, a squadron of stealth fighters launched from a remote base, heading straight for the alien mothership. Their mission was simple: disable the vessel and force the fleet to retreat. What they didn't anticipate, however, was the aliens' advanced defenses. As the fighters approached, beams of energy shot out from the mothership, vaporizing several planes instantly. The remaining pilots scrambled to evade, but their efforts were futile. Within minutes, the entire squadron was obliterated. News of the failed attack reached Earth quickly, further destabilizing an already fragile situation. Public outrage erupted, with millions condemning the decision to attack without provocation. Protesters flooded the streets, demanding accountability from their leaders. Even some politicians spoke out against Hayes, accusing him of recklessness and endangering billions of lives on board the mothership. Daniel and Lavra witnessed the aftermath of the strike firsthand. The aliens showed them footage of the destroyed fighters, their expressions unreadable but tinged with sadness. One of them projected a final sequence of symbols, accompanied by a single, piercing tone. "They're giving us a choice," Daniel said, his voice heavy with realization. "Either we join forces to stop the greater threat, or we face extinction alone," Lavra nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Humanity has always been afraid of the unknown. But if we let fear guide us now, we won't survive." With newfound determination, Daniel and Lavra prepared to return to Earth. Before leaving, the aliens handed them a device, a small, crystalline orb pulsing with light. It contained detailed information about the approaching enemy fleet, including its size, speed, and capabilities. The message was clear. Humanity had to decide whether to fight alongside the aliens or risk annihilation. Back on Earth, Daniel and Lavra delivered their report to a hastily assembled council of world leaders. The atmosphere in the room was tense, with arguments breaking out over how to proceed. General Hayes defended his actions, insisting the strike was necessary to protect Earth. Others, however, pointed to the evidence provided by the aliens, urging caution and cooperation. "You attacked them without cause," one diplomat shouted. "Now they have every reason to see us as hostile. And yet they still offered us a chance to ally with them," Lavra interjected, stepping forward. "Doesn't that tell you something? These beings aren't monsters. They're survivors, just like us." Daniel added, "If we refuse their offer, we're signing our own death warrant. The fleet chasing them is bigger and more powerful than anything we've ever faced. Alone, we don't stand a chance." After hours of heated debate, the council finally reached a decision. Reluctantly, they agreed to form an alliance with the alien fleet, pooling Earth's technological resources to prepare for the battle ahead. Military units were placed under joint command, and scientists worked side by side with the aliens to develop strategies and weapons capable of holding off the enemy. Public opinion shifted dramatically in favor of cooperation as news of the agreement spread. People rallied together, setting aside differences in pursuit of a common goal. Factories churned out supplies, volunteers joined relief efforts, and even rival nations set aside decades of conflict to focus on survival. As preparations intensified, Daniel found himself reflecting on how close humanity had come to self-destruction. The real enemy wasn't the aliens, it was humanity's own fear and mistrust. Standing beside Lavra, watching the skies grow darker with each passing day, he realized that survival depended not just on strength, but on courage, unity, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. For the first time in history, Earth stood united not just as nations, but as a single species facing an existential threat. And though the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, there was a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, humanity wasn't alone after all. The days leading up to the battle were a blur of activity. Humanity and the Velari worked tirelessly to prepare for the arrival of the Zinther, the mysterious and ruthless fleet that had driven the aliens from their home. Factories around the world operated non-stop, producing weapons, shields, and other technologies designed in collaboration with the Velari. Scientists and engineers communicated through hastily constructed interfaces, sharing knowledge and ideas in ways no one had thought possible just weeks before. Daniel Carter and Lavra Bennett played a key role in bridging the gap between humans and the Velari. They spent long hours aboard the alien mothership, helping translate technical concepts and coordinating strategies. The crystalline orb given to them by the Velari contained vital information about the Zinthar's capabilities, including their advanced weaponry and overwhelming numbers. Every detail confirmed what Daniel and Lavra already feared. This would be humanity's greatest test, back on Earth. Sarah Mitchell continued her efforts to keep the public informed. Her broadcast became a lifeline for millions, offering updates on the preparations and encouraging unity. She traveled to cities across the globe, speaking at rallies and meeting with volunteers who had dedicated themselves to the cause. Despite the fear hanging over everyone, there was also a sense of purpose shared, determination to protect their planet and prove they could rise above their differences. General Robert Hayes, however, remained uneasy. Though he had reluctantly agreed to the alliance, his distrust of the Velari lingered. He insisted on maintaining a contingency plan, ensuring that Earth's military forces retained the ability to act independently if needed. To him, trusting the aliens completely was too great a risk. But even Hayes couldn't deny the progress being made. Humanity's combined efforts were impressive, and for the first time, Earth felt like a united front. When the Zinthar finally arrived, the tension was palpable. Their ships appeared on the edge of the solar system, dark and menacing against the backdrop of space. Unlike the sleek, elegant designs of the Velari vessels, the Zinthar fleet looked jagged and brutal, as though built solely for destruction. Thousands of ships poured into view, blotting out the stars. The first wave struck quickly, targeting both the Velari and human fleets stationed near Mars. Energy beams lashed out, tearing through defenses and leaving trails of debris in their wake. Explosions lit up the void, bathing the battlefield in flashes of light. It was chaos pure and unrelenting. From the command center aboard the Velari mothership, Daniel and Lavra watched in horror as ships on both sides were destroyed. The Velari commanders remained calm, issuing orders with precision and efficiency. Human pilots fought valiantly, adapting to combat tactics taught to them by their new allies. Together they managed to hold the line, but the cost was high. "Keep moving," Lavra shouted into her headset, relaying instructions to human squadrons. "Don't let them flank you." Daniel focused on coordinating repairs and reinforcements, his mind racing to anticipate the enemy's next move. The Zinthar were relentless, their attacks methodical and devastating. For every ship they lost, 2 more seemed to take its place. On Earth, Sarah followed the battle through live feeds transmitted from orbiting satellites. The images were surreal, entire fleets clashing in the vast emptiness of space, each side fighting for survival. Civilians gathered in parks and squares, watching giant screens set up by news outlets. Some prayed, others cried, but most simply stood in stunned silence, unable to look away as the hours dragged on. It became clear that humanity's combined forces were outnumbered. The Zinthar pushed forward, breaking through defensive lines and threatening to overrun the inner planets. Morale began to falter, and whispers of surrender spread among the troops. But then something unexpected happened. A group of human scientists, working alongside the Velari, unveiled a secret weapon, a device capable of disrupting the Zinthar's energy shields. It wasn't perfect, the range was limited, and using it required precise timing, but it gave the Alliance a fighting chance. "We need to deploy it now," Daniel urged, turning to the Velari commander. "It's our best shot." The alien nodded, understanding the urgency. Within minutes, a team of human and Velari pilots launched a daring mission to deliver the device deep into enemy territory. Flying under heavy fire, they maneuvered through the chaos, dodging explosions and evading pursuit. When they reached their target, they activated the device, sending a pulse of energy rippling through the Zinthar fleet. The effect was immediate. Dozens of enemy ships fell silent, their shields collapsing and leaving them vulnerable. Seizing the opportunity, the Alliance launched a counterattack, striking hard and fast. The tide of the battle began to turn. Despite the breakthrough, the fight was far from over. The Zinthar regrouped, shifting their focus to Earth itself. Massive ships descended toward the planet, firing indiscriminately at major cities. Skyscrapers crumbled, streets erupted in flames, and countless lives were lost. The devastation was unimaginable, and for a moment it seemed as though all hope was lost. but humanity refused to give up. Civilians banded together, forming makeshift militias to defend their homes. Engineers repurposed civilian vehicles into armored transports, while doctors and nurses worked around the clock to treat the wounded. Even children pitched in, carrying supplies and spreading messages of hope. In orbit, the combined fleets rallied for one final push. Daniel and Lavra coordinated the assault, guiding human and Velari pilots into position. Together, they formed a massive blockade surrounding the remaining Zinther ships and cutting off their escape routes. The battle raged for hours each side delivering everything they had left. Finally, with a deafening roar, the last of the Zinther fleet was destroyed. Silence fell over the battlefield as the surviving ships regrouped, assessing the damage. Billions of lives had been lost, and entire cities lay in ruins. But against all odds, humanity and the Velari had emerged victorious. In the aftermath, Earth faced the monumental task of rebuilding. Governments collaborated on recovery efforts, pooling resources to provide aid to affected regions. The Velari stayed behind to assist, sharing technology and expertise to accelerate the process. Slowly but surely, life began to return to normal, or as close to normal as it could be after such a catastrophe. Documented the journey, capturing stories of resilience and courage. Her articles inspired people to keep going, reminding them of how far they had come. She often visited Daniel and Lavra, marveling at the bond they had formed with the Velari. Together, the trio reflected on the lessons learned during the war. "We almost destroyed ourselves before the Zinther even got here," Daniel said one evening, gazing at the stars. "Our fear nearly cost us everything," Lavra nodded. "But we chose to trust each other instead. That's what saved us." Sarah smiled, her voice filled with quiet pride. "And now we know we're not alone." Maybe that's the real victory. As the months passed, humanity began to rebuild not just its cities, but its spirit. The alliance with the Velari marked the beginning of a new era, an era defined by cooperation, curiosity, and a deeper understanding of the universe. For the first time, Earth looked outward, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. Though scars remained, both physical and emotional, there was a sense of hope in the air. Humanity had faced its darkest hour and emerged stronger than ever. And as Daniel stood beside Lavra, watching the skies clear after months of turmoil, he realized that survival depended not just on strength, but on trust, unity, and the willingness to face the unknown together. The story of Earth's first contact with an alien civilization would be told for generations to come, not as a tale of conquest or fear, but as a testament to the power of hope and the unyielding belief that no matter how vast the cosmos, no one is truly alone.